Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Monday, July the 22nd, 2024. So Mars has just moved into Gemini. That happened over the weekend. And I thought in this video I would consider what it means for Mars to be in Gemini. So I'll briefly look at what it means in general, and I'll look at some people and events and perhaps countries that have Mars in Gemini. So that's pretty simple what I'm going to attempt to achieve there. I suppose there might be a certain predictive basis to that. If you've got a country with Mars in Gemini or a person with Mars in Gemini, then right now, as Mars moves into Gemini, as we get a Mars return coming up for this person event, well, not really event, but a country, then we might expect something to happen. But before I do that, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Monday, July the 22nd, 2024. There, by the way, are some people who have Mars in Gemini. Jill Biden, the wife of Joe, she has Mars in Gemini. So does Melania, who is, of course, wife of Donald. And Melania's son, Barron Trump, he has Mars in Gemini. So that's quite a Mars in Gemini family, isn't it? Boris Johnson, Mars in Gemini, and the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, she has Mars in Gemini. Okay, so today the moon is in Aquarius, and the moon is going to be in Aquarius all day, so it doesn't really matter what your time zone is. It's certainly a moon in Aquarius day. So as it is a moon in Aquarius day, it's going to be a day when we can be relatively objective, but many of us are going to value our independence, and we're not going to be overwhelmed by all the garbage and chatter around us. We can think for ourselves. Indeed, that is what we should be striving to do, to think for ourselves. Now, the moon does make an aspect to Jupiter in Gemini. Well, in fact, yeah, there it is. So at noon New York time on July the 22nd, there's a moon at 17 Aquarius in a trine aspect to Jupiter in Gemini. So moon trine Jupiter, it's a nice aspect. Things move. There's a sense of action, and we're probably going to be luckier than average, though we don't want to overdo it. Yes, the moon makes a trine to Jupiter, but it also makes an opposition to Venus. So moon opposition Venus can be a little bit indulgent. The way we express our feelings, if we feel we have to express our feelings, maybe a little bit false. We might have to try to work rather hard on that, and as a result it might come over as being a little bit contrived. Now, one thing about this chart that you may notice is that it is very positive. So the positive elements are are fire and air. And as you can see, there's a lot in fire signs. We've got Sun, Venus, and Mercury in a fire sign. Yes, because the Sun actually moves into Leo today, and I'll be talking about that in a moment. So we've got the fire signs there. We've got quite a lot of air signs, but as far as the earth signs, we have got no personal planets. We've no traditional planets in earth signs. All we've got is Uranus in Taurus, unless you count true black mean, true black moon Lilith in Virgo, but I wouldn't count that. So not much Earth here. In fact, pretty much no Earth. In terms of water, Saturn and Neptune. So there's really not much Earth and water. So there's not many planets in negative signs. It's all positive. It's all about action. It's all about putting stuff out. And it's kind of nice in one sense that there's so much positivity in the sky, but there's kind of a danger that we sort of burn ourselves out. We don't take the time to sort of relax and to reflect, in particular, reflect. So I think we should make a special effort to reflect today, because it actually might be quite difficult to reflect. You know, there might be just so much going on. We feel we have to do this, we have to do that. And we don't perhaps stop and not just think what we're doing, but feel what we're doing. And I think we need to perhaps be aware of that imbalance today. Now, the sun does move into Leo. Sun moves into Leo today at, when does it move into Leo? 8:44 in the morning, London time. So in the Americas, it's you know, when you get up, as you come into Monday, the moon is pretty much in Leo. Sorry, the sun is pretty much in Leo. Yeah, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the sun might not go into Leo until this evening. But wherever you are, the sun is going into Leo today. So that is a big change. The train has finally completely left Cancer. So for the last few months, there's been this train going through the signs, and it goes from one sign to another sign, and we've been tracking it through the signs, and now the train is completely in Leo. All the carriages are in Leo. Sun, Venus, and Mercury are there. So a lot of emphasis now on Leo. So I suppose that means that people do require a lot of attention, maybe. It may be the case that flattery gets you everywhere. So if you get a chance to pay someone a compliment, then use that chance. It doesn't hurt to tell someone how wonderful they are, or to focus on their achievements, and to just give them a bit of recognition, because you know that's what it's all about. It is about recognition and just knowing you exist. You know, in this world, you know, there's so much going on that sometimes we can feel ignored, that the world doesn't care, that the world just passes us by. But with the sun going into Leo, it is going to be important to get some recognition. Now, another aspect going on today, which actually this aspect took place last night on Sunday evening, but I think we might be feeling it nonetheless, is a square aspect between Mercury and Uranus. And this Mercury square Uranus is important because, you know, Uranus at the moment is now very close to the fixed star Algol. Let me just see how close. I think it's probably something like 1 or 2 degrees. It's 3 arc minutes away from Algol. So that's close, and it's going to get even closer. And so with Uranus in this position, we've got Mercury making a square to Uranus. And I think we're going to be feeling it a little bit today, Monday as well as Sunday. And so with Mercury square Uranus, it's kind of triggering the Algol. And so we may actually get some Algol-like events Sunday, Monday. There could be reminders that we do live in a dangerous and difficult world. And on a personal level, some of us might feel a little bit anxious and tense that, you know, things aren't going entirely right. But by the time we hit Monday, this aspect between Mercury square Uranus is starting to fade, so I don't want to go on about it too much. Then we have got, the Sun just before it enters Leo, it trines Neptune. So we're going to feel that even after the Sun moves into Leo. So Sun trine Neptune, I mean, that's nice, I suppose, in some respects. It's a bit otherworldly. And it's perhaps a necessary balance. I've mentioned the fact that there are a lot of planets in positive signs, fire and air. And where is the feeling? Where is the sensitivity? Well, perhaps the Sun trine Neptune mitigates a little bit. If we can just take a step back from it all, if we can tune into our feelings, if we can just get some idea about what the cosmos is telling us, what is going on at a sort of emotional and spiritual level, the Sun trine Neptune may inform us. And another trine happening is Mars trine Pluto. So Mars is now in very early Gemini, and Mars in Gemini is trine Pluto. So it's a trine, so it doesn't have the dynamism of a square or an opposition or a conjunction or even a semi-square or a sesquiquadrate. It doesn't have that kind of dynamism. It's kind of easier. And so perhaps with Mars trine Pluto, it could be easier to assert ourselves and to make things happen. But we don't have to do it in a dramatic way. We can create a quiet transformation. But we do have to be aware that it might be other people trying to enact this transformation. So we might be manipulated without even knowing what's going on. So we do need to be aware of that possibility. Now, turning to the heliocentric picture, and I'm not entirely sure what's happening heliocentrically. Here we are. So this is the heliocentric picture, looking at things, remember, from a perspective of the Sun being in the center of the solar system. And from a heliocentric view, we kind of have a T-square here. We have Mercury, which heliocentrically has entered Sagittarius, making an opposition to Jupiter. So Mercury opposition Jupiter, there could be frantic mental activity. Many of us are trying to be optimistic, trying to see the big picture, and a lot of people with a lot of ideas. And with Venus on the T, so Venus making the square to Jupiter, Mercury square Venus, there is a sense in which some of us are trying to communicate our ideas, and we're trying to make things work better. And it's difficult to make things work better, but that is what we're trying to do. And so the world, is full of people talking as well. People have got lots to say. And I suppose the danger here is that they have lots to say, but are they really thinking about their audience? That is the danger. With all these planets in positive signs, and I'm going back to the heliocentric view, in air signs and fire signs, there is some danger that we talk, that we put stuff out without being aware of the audience. I mean, if you want to be an effective performer, as I understand it, I'm not a performer, but if I were to be a performer, as I understand it, there is a two-way flow between you and your audience. You have to have some sensitivity to your audience. Otherwise, your audience won't listen to you, or they'll leave. And so perhaps there's a danger here that people talk, but they don't get listened to. And they forget who they're talking to. Mercury square Venus, Jupiter square Venus. So if you're saying something, always leave a line of communication open with your audience so that you can receive information about how your audience are responding to you, so that you can moderate your message. If you close that line of communication down and it just becomes a one-way flow, you doing the talking, then you might be ignored, or you might even see people leaving. So that's the heliocentric picture. Of course, the problem for me here is this is a recording, and I don't know how you're responding, because by the time you're watching this video, I've already said it. I can't. This is not. I suppose if I was streaming, I would be able to respond to the audience, and I suppose I would see little messages clicking up. I don't know how to stream. Maybe I'm going to work it out one day and do some streaming. I don't know whether that's a good idea. Is that a good idea? I don't know. What do you think? So that's the heliocentric picture. Now, I should say that if you are enjoying this video, I would be really grateful if you were to like this video. If you are not subscribed, I would be super grateful if you were to subscribe. I would really appreciate that. Okay, so I now want to look at today from the perspective of the 12 signs. So let's go back to the geocentric picture. There we go. Okay, these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Monday, July the 22nd, 2024. Aries. Mars is now in Gemini, and that's the theme of this video. So with Mars moving through Gemini, you feel a big change. Mars is out of Taurus. Mars didn't really work very well in Taurus, did it? Mars was in its detriment in Taurus. You know, Mars rules Aries. Sorry, Mars rules Scorpio and Aries, but Taurus is the opposite sign of Scorpio. So that's why Mars was in its detriment. It might have all been a bit too slow for you. Everything was a battle, perhaps a battle against the material world. And you know, recently you've had Mars making a conjunction to Uranus, and that could have shaken things up a bit. But things are changing now. Mars is in Gemini, new opportunities, and I think that things are going to be moving faster. And your mind is going to be moving faster. And you may feel that you've got more to say. And you're going to be helped also by the fact that Mars is trine Pluto. So Mars trine Pluto gives you the opportunity to make things happen. So if you're not happy with something in the world, your actions can change it, even transform it. But it's not too stressful. This is a trine. It's not an opposition or a square where you have to really struggle to create change. Change can happen easily. So it might be, for example, that if you don't like the way something is, you can just say something. Just speak your mind. And your words might almost have a magical power. You know, that is Mars in Gemini. Your words have power, and you know that's how you're expressing yourself. Mars in Gemini. You know, Mars is your ruler. It's in Gemini, so Mars works best when it is talking, communicating, and because Mars is in Gemini, Gemini is a two-bodied sign. You don't have to just focus on one thing. It might be best to focus on two things or three things, because Gemini feeds on variety. So you do need a little bit of variety. If you just were to concentrate on one particular activity, I think you'd very quickly become really quite bored about it. So I think that things are getting more interesting for you, and you might feel, Aries, that you've got room to breathe. Though, don't feel that you need to get dramatic results. Yes, you can make things happen, but it is Mars in Gemini. It's not Mars in Aries. It's not Mars in a fire sign. It's perhaps about you gathering information. Yeah, there's always information to gather. So that might be one thing you have to do. Asking a lot of questions. No harm in asking questions. Your questions can be a little bit aggressive, but not too aggressive. So I suppose if you're an Aries journalist, for example, or maybe a police officer, someone who needs to ask questions, I think your questions can hit the mark and you can find out what you need, but don't be too aggressive. I understand you can be a little bit aggressive so that you get your answers, but you don't have to be totally aggressive. Now, if there is a problem perhaps with Mars in Gemini, it may be a certain amount of insensitivity. Now, I've already said or suggested in this video that there is a certain lack of sensitivity today, because the emphasis today is on air signs and fire signs. It's not on the water signs and the earth signs. So, Aries, there's a certain danger that as you go through today, you ignore other people's feelings. You're so thinking about what you want to do, what you'd like to hear, what you want to communicate, that you might just forget that other people do have a certain sensitivity, and perhaps you would be wise to take it into account. Don't just say the first thing that comes to mind, even if you don't actually understand what someone is feeling. Assume that they do have a set of feelings, and assume that if you say too much, if you're too abrasive, that you might upset their emotional balance, and that might cause problems. But I shouldn't deny the fact that it's a day when things are happening, and the sun is actually moving into Leo today, and from an Aries perspective, that is great news. It means that the sun is starting to make a sextile to Mars. Now, that sextile to Mars is not exact until the end of the week, but it's getting there. And Sun sextile Mars, as the week progresses, you're going to become very focused, very positive. You're going to want to make things happen. I think by and large, that is good news. But you have to be careful that you don't push it too far. These two positive masculine planets in sextile to each other could cause aggravation. And I think you might feel that as the week progresses if you're not careful, if you're not sensitive. So, yes, you can accomplish a great deal, not just today, but as the week progresses. But you do always have to think about the cost, and you do have to think about the impact you're having on other people. So that is, I think, Aries, something you need to consider, and a little bit of sensitivity wouldn't go amiss. Taurus, Mars is well and truly out of your sign, and I actually think that is quite a good thing. It's been perhaps a bit too much having Mars moving through Taurus, particularly right at the end. Mars was making a conjunction to to Uranus. It was on Algol, and the pressure might have become quite intense, and you might have felt that you were supposed to do things, that you were supposed to take action, and you weren't always in the mood, and it just might have become a bit exhausting. And so with Mars moving into Gemini, there may be a certain sense of relief. But that doesn't mean to say that there's no pressure, that you don't have any ambitions, that you don't feel that there are deadlines, for example. I think you do still feel a pressure. You feel that there are things that you would like to do. And you're perhaps reminded of the fact, as Mars moves into Gemini, of the fact that Pluto is now in the first degree of Aquarius. So Pluto in Aquarius, Taurus, is about you having a strong set of ambitions. Now, these ambitions might not be about money, career, or status, or anything like that. It just might be just something you feel you actually have to do. And it may be something quite long term. You know, Pluto stays in Aquarius for a long time. I don't know, it stays there for whatever, well over a decade. And so with Pluto moving into, well, Pluto's still in Aquarius. It does briefly leave Aquarius and move into Capricorn, but it does come back into Aquarius, and then it stays there for ages. So, you know, it is a time when Taurians are ambitious, and they know that there is something that has to happen. Now, some of that ambition, some of that pressure has gone now that Mars has moved out of Taurus, but it's still there. And today, actually, Mars makes a trine aspect to Pluto. Now, it's a trine aspect, and a trine isn't quite an easy aspect. And so it may be that it is relatively easy to move towards the achievement of some of your aims, some of your goals. It may be there's just one small thing that needs to be changed or transformed. You haven't bothered about it recently, but now you're thinking, hold on, let's change it. This thing is getting in my way. Let's get rid of it. So if you take that kind of attitude, I think you will be quite successful when it comes to getting rid of something that is blocking your progress. And it needn't be a drama. I don't think that there'll be too much of a protest. I think other people will be reasonably cooperative. In fact, you know, Mars can actually represent another person, because I mean, Mars rules Scorpio, your opposite sign, and so it may be that through another person's help, you can move closer towards the achievement of some of your goals, and perhaps someone else is going to help you to change something. So if there's something you feel really needs to be changed, then with another person's assistance, you can actually make it happen. And while all this is going on, the moon is in Aquarius, and so with the moon in Aquarius, it's trine Jupiter. Moon trine Jupiter moon in Aquarius, trine Jupiter in Gemini. That's further evidence that things are moving your way, that you can make things happen without causing much of a fuss. And don't ignore the financial dimension. You know, it might seem kind of beneath you a little to be worrying about money, but hey, you're a Taurus. Money at some level always does matter, doesn't it? However rich you are, it's all relative, isn't it? And so your actions can really give a boost to your financial position, I think. So if you're not happy with your financial position, particularly in a short-term sense, then there are things you can do to really make things happen. It's absolutely possible. And although some of the pressure is off you now that Mars is out of your sign, still you can get people to pay attention to you. And I think in most cases, they're going to want to help you. They're going to want to cooperate. But even if they don't want to cooperate, you can do things that just get attention. But attention in a way that isn't difficult to deal with. It's just attention about you getting the focus. And maybe, of course, that relates also to the sun moving in Leo. I mean, I know that obviously you're not a Leo, but still, with the sun moving in Leo, everyone needs attention, a little bit of attention, and that includes you. Gemini. Mars is now in your sign, and I think that by and large that is a good thing. You know, Mars is the planet of assertion. We want things to happen. We want things to happen our way. That's Mars. And now that Mars is in Gemini, you can start to have quite a powerful impact. And you may feel that, now is the time for action. You will, I think, be quite successful. I mean, Mars is trine Pluto. So with this Mars trine Pluto, Mars in Gemini, trine Pluto in Aquarius, it's a time when you can say what's on your mind, you can say what you believe, you can take action towards the achievement of some of your goals. And by goals, I'm not really just talking about material ambitions. I'm talking about some of your philosophical goals. How you would like the world to be, how you would like the world to be organized. Focusing on what you feel to be right. And that is a direction certainly in which you can move in. And I suppose if you feel that there's some kind of injustice going on, then you may be the person to resolve it. If you want to be a humanitarian, Gemini, you certainly can be. So I think that is certainly good news. And overall, Gemini, I think that things are moving, and in one sense it's your kind of day because we've got all of these planets in positive signs. Gemini is a positive sign because it's an earth sign, an air sign, and we've got all the planets, many of the planets in air and fire signs. So it's all about positivity. And perhaps you can see the problem there. The problem here is that one of the criticisms that can be made against Geminis is that Geminis can be a little bit too detached. They can be a little bit too in their heads, and they can ignore the emotional dimension. And I'm saying that as a Gemini. And today that temptation is particularly strong. So it is possible, Gemini, that some of your actions are just too dismissive of the human dimension. You might just think, oh, things can happen. We don't need to worry about feelings. I can't feel anything, so that means there are no feelings going on. I don't have to worry about that. But I think you'd be mistaken. You might get away with it today, but if you are ignoring the way people feel and you're totally focused on yourself and on what you want, then you're going to annoy people. I won't say you're going to make enemies, but this is not an environment that is, in long term, is going to be useful. You do have to make a special effort today to understand people's feelings, even if you can't see anything, even if you feel nothing. If you're a real sort of schizoid Gemini, but then I suppose is that the nature of being a Gemini, being schizoid? It wasn't Marilyn Monroe when she was a Gemini. She was asked what it's like to be a Gemini, apparently, and she said it's like being Jekyll and Hyde. You've got two different people, and you can totally, if you want, for long periods of time, totally cut off the emotional side of things. But you have to make a special effort to understand what is happening emotionally, because if you don't, you could be storing up trouble for yourself. But that shouldn't take away from the fact, Gemini, that it can be a very useful day, very constructive day when things are happening. And I suppose most importantly, today can be exciting. Cancer. It's perhaps today just a little bit too positive for your liking. You know, we've got a load of planets in air signs. You know, we've got Mars, Jupiter, the Moon. The Moon really important. The Moon is your ruler. We've got a load of planets in air signs. Got a load of planets in fire signs. The Sun, remember, is moving into Leo. And we've got Sun, Venus, Mercury in Leo. So it just might be a bit too much for Cancer. You know, Cancer is of course a negative sign by virtue of the fact that it's a water sign. It has a reflective side to it. And so you may feel that there's just a lot going on, and at the same time you may feel that your own feelings are being discounted. People aren't making sufficient effort to understand the way you are feeling. And there would be a temptation here to regard other people as being insensitive, selfish, rude. But maybe you should try to be tolerant. You know, we are living in a world, at least today we're living in a world where people are insensitive. And that's just perhaps the way it is. Now, you may be tempted to just have a display of righteous outrage at someone's insensitive behavior, or the world's insensitive behavior. But I would really recommend that you don't. I think you just try to understand the way things are going, just the way the planets are right now. Just go with the flow and take what you can, because one aspect we do have today, which I think that you can benefit from, is a trine between the Sun and Neptune. So what's happening is that the Sun is leaving Cancer today, moving into Leo. So that's it. The Cancer season is over. And just before the Sun leaves Cancer, it makes a trine to Neptune. And I think that trine to Neptune is rather nice, particularly for Cancerians. It does give you a sense of flow. It's reassuring. It reminds you that however difficult things are in the world out there, you are plugged in. So whatever other people are doing, they can do what they like, but you are the one that actually knows what's going on, and you really need to emphasize that in terms of how you respond to the world. So if you find yourself upset by someone's behavior, or perhaps someone's ignoring you or whatever, just remind yourself that you're the one that knows what's going on. You do. You know what's going on. Other people may be insensitive. Other people may not be able to read each other's feelings, but you can. And that gives you an advantage. So rather than being annoyed, you should just perhaps have a slight sense of superiority, emotional superiority. Just quietly know that you're the one who really understands what's going on. And I'm just hoping that will give you a certain sense of detachment. And I think you can have a sense of detachment today, a very useful sense of detachment. Not emotional detachment in the sense of being unemotional, but having strong feelings, yes, but at the same time understanding things and not just feeling that you have to be caught up in other people's mess. You don't have to be. And with the moon making with the moon making a trine to Jupiter, that trine to Jupiter is really very fortunate, and it allows you to look at what's going on around you, to pick up on things happening, and to draw some important conclusions. And these conclusions could be very useful. The one thing I should point out is that the moon is making an opposition to Venus. That moon opposition Venus could be a little excessive. There may just be one thing in your life that you put a little bit too much energy into. It may be money. It's probably not a good idea to spend too much money. You might feel it's necessary. You might even, in some circumstances, feel that you have to spend money to make yourself feel more comfortable, because it's a world that it's very different from what you're used to. It's very different from what you'd like to be, at least for today. But money's not going to help. Just go with the flow and use that Sun trine Neptune. Even after the Sun moves into Leo, the Sun will still be trine Neptune, and this does allow you to be, plugged into what's going on and just enjoy your emotional superiority. Leo. Well, it's here. The Sun is moving into your sign, and of course, it's brilliant news, isn't it? The Sun likes being in Leo. The Sun rules Leo. So with the Sun moving into Leo, I think that you're feeling comfortable with yourself, and I think that you're feeling strong, and you're feeling that you're able to make things happen. And so you can now sort of look forward, of course, to the Leo season, because obviously the Sun is going to be in Leo now until the end of August. So there is a lot that you can accomplish, and there is a lot that you can look forward to. Though, as I was telling Gemini that you need to make a special effort to be sensitive. And I would kind of say the same thing to you. Just before the Sun enters Leo, it makes a trine to Neptune. And this Sun trine Neptune is very sensitive. And even after the Sun moves into Leo, that trine between the Sun and Neptune will still be there. So however much you want to be active and dynamic and positive, pushing forward with your agenda, however much you're doing that, you still have an opportunity to reflect on what you're doing. Reflection is going to be difficult. It may require a little bit of work on your part, but you don't want to be so focused on yourself that you burn everything out. I mean, that would be unnecessary. And I think that the Sun trine Neptune does allow you to sort of tune into what's going on. And so it may not be automatic. it may not be the first thing that comes to mind, but perhaps you should just make a special effort to every now and then check the temperature. Maybe a bit of a pain, but it is that thing. I don't know if you know, for example, if there's a greenhouse and you don't want your plants to die, or you don't want your plants to wither, and you've got and the greenhouse is heated or whatever, you know, every few hours, go to the greenhouse, check the temperature. Maybe everything will be fine. But so you need to do the same thing with the people around you. Just check the temperature, work out what's happening, and then perhaps adjust your approach. And by checking your temperature, you might see that someone is not happy about something, needs to talk something through, and you can be there. You can stop what you're doing, spend 5 minutes working out what's happening and giving some reassurance. It just would make things a lot easier for you. But I don't want to take away from the fact that it is a useful and powerful day when I think that you can greatly benefit from other people, other people's company. People are a resource, your friends, partners, whatever. They are a resource which you can use, but don't take advantage of in a one-sided, manipulative kind of way. There might be that temptation, but I wouldn't recommend it at all. And also, I should point out that the Sun, when it moves into Leo, starts making a sextile aspect to Mars. And that Sun sextile Mars, it gets stronger as the week progresses. And so that's about you being dynamic, perhaps being dynamic in quite a social sense. You can introduce yourself, discuss what you want, and I think that people are going to respond very well to you. And they're particularly going to respond well to you if you make sure you just check the temperature every now and then. I think that is going to be very important. But overall, Leo, it's looking good. And if you want it to be really good, really amazing, just show a little bit of sensitivity when dealing with other people, because I think that sensitivity, it will just complete the picture and will really give you the best possible chance of getting what you want and, most importantly, being happy and fulfilled. Virgo. It's perhaps a little bit of a difficult time for Virgos in some respects, because it may just be all too much. And, there is a lot happening, and a lot of people are in the mood for action, and you're not entirely in the mood for, pushing things as hard as you can. That's not really what you want to do, and you are quite sensitive at the moment. You perhaps at some level, you would like to just watch, not become part of the circus. And matters aren't helped by the fact that the Sun is moving into Leo. Leo is the sign before Virgo. So yeah, sure, the Sun does go into Virgo in a month's time, but it's not there yet. You've got a month to wait. And very often in that month just before the Sun going into Virgo, you feel perhaps a need for reflection. Perhaps you've got things that you need to work out on your own. But, right now, there's just so much positivity. It just could be a bit overwhelming, and you just might feel a bit stressed out by it all. So, Virgo, today, I think it's just important that you give yourself space, that you don't allow yourself to be overwhelmed by all the action taking place. But at some level, there are things that you would be advised to do. You can't just watch things from a distance, because, well, you could, but I think that might be a waste, because what's happening is that Mars is moving into Gemini, and that is important. Okay, Mars moved into Gemini over the weekend, and it's now going to, it's going to stay in Gemini, I think, until early September. And Gemini is, I suppose it is quite a high-profile sign in the Virgo chart. It's often connected with ambitions and business and how you present yourself in society. And so, with Mars moving into Gemini, making a trine to Pluto, there is pressure on you to make your influence felt, and that might not be something you want to do, but I think you should perhaps be doing it at the moment, because you have got something to offer, and you're perhaps more powerful than you realize, and at the same time, you are someone who can make things happen. It may seem that it's other people wanting action, other people with the ideas, but you have your own ideas. You have your own view of the world. You perhaps don't always express it. Perhaps you're being modest about it, but I don't think now is the time for being too modest. I think Virgo, with Mars moving into Gemini, this is a time when you need to be working out how you're going to make your impact, and I think today you can make an impact. And the key thing to making an impact is, I think it's about having a plan. So ideally today you will start with a plan. You will make a decision earlier in the day about what you're going to do, and also what you're not going to do, what you're going to accept and what you're going to not accept. And just by sticking to this plan, by sticking to what you want to achieve, then I think that you can, in your own way, really make things happen. And I think that you will be helped by the fact that Mercury, which is your ruler, is starting to move towards Regulus. And Regulus is the royal star. So Regulus is often connected with high position, important people, and it is a time when you can project yourself and your ambitions. Okay, you're helped by the fact that Mars is moving into Gemini, but it's also the fact that Mercury, your ruler, is on Regulus. It's about you in your own way being important and people treating you as important. And at the same time, you're going to find it relatively easy to deal with people who are themselves important. Importance is always relative, but people who you regard as being important, you know how to interact with them. And I think it's just important that you just do make the most of it. And of course, remember, Mercury does move into Virgo very soon. And so, in fact, as Mercury moves into Virgo, Mercury will still be on Regulus, because Regulus is now, I think, the exact point where Regulus is. I think it's something like, I don't know, 0 something Virgo. Regulus used to be in Leo for a long time, but it's actually moved into Virgo. So with Mercury on Regulus, really not just today, but the whole week, you can really benefit from this. So you can be important yourself. And if you need to interact with important people, then I think that you will have the opportunity. Libra. By and large, Libra, I would have said that things are pretty well configured. You've got Mars moving into Gemini. Gemini is an air sign. Libra is an air sign. The moon is currently in Aquarius. That's an air sign. So I think you're going to be feeling reasonably comfortable. You're going to feel that things are moving your way. And we also have the sun moving into Leo. And with the sun moving into Leo, you're probably feeling that you are able to interact with the world out there in a social way. I think your social skills are good. And the sun in Leo is really going to improve that. And I think that when you're in company, I think in most cases you're going to get the attention you deserve, though it shouldn't worry you too much whether or not you're being ignored. It's not really what matters, with the moon moving into Aquarius, moving through Aquarius. Aquarius is quite independent-minded, and I think Libra, it shouldn't matter what people say about you, whether people approve of what you're doing. If it feels right to you, then it's okay. And you shouldn't have to explain or apologize. And, overall, I think that you can do stuff which is really of high quality and is also forward-thinking. Yes, Libra, you can be forward-thinking today. And you shouldn't worry too much about pre-existing norms. You might think that if you're too forward-thinking, other people might not approve or you might get criticism. Just don't worry about it. Just tune into yourself and your creativity, and don't be afraid of being an individual, because today you really can be an individual. You can move beyond all these ties of, family and friends and society, which can hold you back. You think you have to conform. You're a Libra, you like to be balanced and all this kind of thing. But there comes a point where you do have to take a stand. And I think that, by taking a stand and being yourself, there won't be any resistance. I don't think so. And try not to be oversensitive. I think in your case, it's not going to be worth the effort trying to be sensitive. Now, it kind of depends on what your sign is. And I think for some signs, I have suggested that these signs make a special effort to be sensitive. In your case, no, I don't think so. If you try to be too sensitive, then you will be misusing the prevailing energies. This is a day for being positive, for putting stuff out. It's not a day for responding. And by being positive, being very focused about what you want, then things will start to move your way. And I think a little bit of selfishness could go a long way. There's nothing wrong with being a little bit selfish. It is a time to be putting yourself first, and I think it will actually be appreciated. People are looking for positive, dynamic actors. And if you can be a positive, dynamic actor, then I think that it will be very much appreciated. But yeah, if you tie yourself in knots, trying to worry trying to get it right in terms of your various social connections, well, that would be a shame. I think you'd be wasting really a huge amount of energy, and I think in the process you would probably get absolutely nowhere. But also, Mars has changed sign. Mars changed sign over the weekend. It moved from Taurus into Gemini, and with that sign change, it might not just have an impact on you. It might have an impact on other people, particularly the some of the people who are close to you, who are important to you. Other people's priority is changing. And I think that as you want more variety, want a sense of the big picture, it's the same with other people. So, in fact, people don't want conformity, or rather the people that matter don't want conformity. Conformity might seem the easiest thing to offer, but no, they don't want conformity. They understand that change is required, that perhaps we have to start considering new ideas, that the old ideas are simply not working anymore. And it's a time when people who can come up with new ideas are the ones that will get the attention. So that's what is required of you. It's required of you to think about the future rather than the past. And that's what everyone else expects. And if you feel that you can't envisage the future, that you don't have a plan, that you can't see any concept of the big picture, then it's okay. See what other people have got to say. They might come up with some very useful stuff. They might give you some ideas. So there can be a bit of a talking shop today where people are being positive. People are not worrying about whether an idea is practical or not. It's not that kind of day. It's a day for speculating. I do not mean speculating financially. I mean speculating with ideas. And it's that kind of day. And if you can use your imagination and show the world how wonderfully imaginative you are, and also at the same time appreciate other people's imagination, then I don't think you're going to be sorry. And from a career business point of view, if that is relevant, I think that today you can be very creative, you can have great ideas, and I think in many respects you can be rewarded for your creativity. Now, as far as enjoyment is concerned, Moon is trine Jupiter in air signs. You're an air sign. To my mind, that really does mean that you really are in a position to have a fun day. Just be imaginative, be positive, and just don't worry too much about other people's feelings. They're not quite as sensitive as you think they are. Scorpio. Things are happening, and there are some sign changes that we need to talk about. Now, one sign change is the most obvious sign change, and that is, of course, the Sun moving into Leo. And that sign change is important, and I think it's relevant to Scorpios. So, thinking about this sign change, Leo is, in the Scorpio chart, is often connected with ambition and status and career. It's a high-profile sign for you, Scorpio. So you've already got Mercury and Venus moving through Leo. Now you've got Sun moving into Leo as well. Sun is in its own sign in Leo. Now, I do understand that the Sun is obviously always in Leo at the same time of year. It's always in Leo, sort of high summer if you're in the northern hemisphere, I suppose low winter or whatever if you're in the southern hemisphere. It's always there at this time. So, in a way, it's kind of your time of year. And so, as it's your time of year, you should take advantage of it. You should be, it's Leo, Sun in Leo. It's Scorpio's time of year in the sense of being successful. projecting themselves outwards, projecting themselves forward with the sun moving into Leo. So do take advantage of it. I know that, certainly in the Northern Hemisphere, people are supposed to, often they go on holiday, don't they? Sort of late July and August. People like going on holiday. They like jetting off somewhere, regardless of the impact on global warming, and it's amazing, isn't it, how much ice gets melted by just a plane journey. Tons of ice, and people think, well, it's not my responsibility. That plane would take off with or without me. But of course, if enough people decided they wouldn't fly, then of course flights would get cancelled. Anyway, I'm digressing. What I'm kind of getting at, Scorpio, is that it may be a bad idea to spend the next month doing nothing. There are things to do. If you went on holiday, spent the next month on the beach, then aside from destroying your skin, you would be wasting a lot of time. And there are things to do. So try to think about that and ask yourself, what are you planning to do over the next month? Because I think that there are useful things that you can be doing. And while this is happening, Mars, which is your ruler, Mars is moving into Gemini. And Mars moving into Gemini does create a change. I've already discussed this, but just to go over it again, you had Mars in Taurus, and Scorpio, from your perspective, Taurus is a sign that, very much connected with other people, with relationships, the other, and perhaps you'd had to put a lot of effort into dealing with outside pressure, but now things have changed. Mars moving into Gemini is a time which is more about you and the depths of your feelings. Now, that might sound a strange thing to say. Mars moving into Gemini is about depths of feelings, because Gemini is a somewhat unemotional planet, supposedly. But for you, with Mars moving into Gemini, it's a time when you can do a lot of thinking, deep thinking, and really get to the bottom of things between now and beginning of September. And as Mars moves into Gemini, it makes a trine to Pluto. So that Mars trine Pluto is actually really powerful. It's like you can really look at who you are and reach into the depths of the Scorpio personality, the Scorpio unconscious, and really get an understanding of what matters. And in the process, you might be a little bit defensive. It's a complicated world out there, but at the same time, you do understand what is going on. And this defensiveness, by the way, is going to get a little bit stronger tomorrow as well, because we do have an aspect going on. The Sun is opposition Pluto, and this is across an important axis in your chart, Scorpio. So with that Sun opposition Pluto, a little bit of defensiveness is creeping in, and there are going to be things that you don't want to discuss, and your privacy is going to be important. And it's just important that you don't take it too far. Yes, you're a private person, but you can be too private. And, with the Sun moving into Leo, like it or not, this is a time when people need to know what you stand for. And if you don't tell people what you stand for, Scorpio, then you mustn't be surprised when things don't go your way, when people do things that annoy you or upset you, because you haven't told them. So what can you expect? But if you tell people what you want, what you expect, then they're going to listen to you. So make sure you do that. Because really, Scorpio, you are in a strong position and you need to understand your strengths and just not assume that people are going to just do things your way without telling. You just have to tell them a bit. You don't have to make a big fuss about it. Just be open with them, and I think they'll appreciate your honesty, and I think in most cases they'll do things your way. Sagittarius. It's great, isn't it, that the sun is moving into Leo. I mean, you're a fire sign. And at the same time, you know, we've got Venus in Leo, we've got Mercury in Leo. So you just feel that things are starting to really go your way. That the universe is now on your side and is prepared to listen to you. Is it? Or maybe it's you listening to the universe. Or perhaps as you relate to the universe, you feel that you and the universe are all on the same wavelength, and perhaps that's actually what's going on. And with the sun moving into Leo, it's somewhat spiritual, or at least philosophical. It's a time when you start to get a sense of your place in the grand scheme of things, even your place in the creation, and how you can best respond to this place, this role. And it's just not enough just to have short-term ideas. You know, the ideas, you know, ideas are very nice, but one idea leads to another idea and it all becomes very trivial. But what you need to think is about, you need to think about the larger idea with the sun moving into Leo. It's about where you're going, where you're heading, maybe not just in this incarnation, but the next incarnation, if you happen to believe in incarnation, in reincarnation. And so when you look at what's happening in the world, try to see the connections, because you of all people, you can find the connections, you can see the connections, you can see how people and events are all linked together, and how there is some grand plan working its way through. And I think that is something that you're actually very aware of. At the same time, Aquarius, it's important that I think that you ask questions and that you make the most of other people. You know, the moon is making a trine to Jupiter. You know, Jupiter is your ruler. It's in Gemini. Gemini is the opposite sign to Sagittarius. So when the moon is making a trine to Jupiter, that allows you to really benefit from people, and that might mean that you have to make a little bit of an effort. So if you feel that you'd like someone's opinion, or you want to hear what someone has to say, then, you know, by all means get in touch with them. It may be a great day for making targeted phone calls. But you know, perhaps you need someone's advice. Perhaps you'd like to share some ideas with someone. Now would be the time to do it. If not a phone call, maybe a brief visit, short visit. Could be a short, could just be somewhere you can walk to, or just a short car drive. I don't know. However you decide to make that visit, I think that could be very successful, and that could work out very well. And so it is a day when things overall really are happening, But I suppose if were to give you a warning, I mean, it's a warning that I've given to other signs. It's the fact that right now there are a lot of planets in fire signs. More specifically, we've got Sun, Venus, Mercury in Leo, and of course we've got a lot of planets in air signs. But there are not so many planets, particularly the personal traditional planets. We don't have so many planets in Earth and water signs. So the overall atmosphere today, Sagittarius, is somewhat unsensitive. People are not particularly sensitive because it's all about positivity. It's about moving forward. It's all about projecting oneself. It's not really about reflection. And Sagittarius as a sign can be somewhat gung-ho, can just go storming in, act first, think later. And it can be that some Sagittarians do have an insensitive streak. Maybe all Sagittarians have an insensitive streak. They can say things which are very blunt. They have that same connection with Taurus. There's this weird similarity between Taurus and Sagittarius. Both signs can be rather blunt, but there's something spontaneous and unaffected, almost childlike about the Sagittarian bluntness. Sagittarius just tell someone as it is. They make a comment about someone, and it's not meant to be offensive. They're just being honest. But that Sagittarian honesty needs to be tempered today, because of the lack of water and earth. There's just as a danger of crassness here, being completely completely unsensitive and hurting people's feelings. And you may not even know that you're hurting people's feelings. So as you move through the day, as you interact with people, it's true that your interactions with other people can be very successful if they are managed correctly. But Sagittarius, it would be a shame if a little bit of insensitivity spoilt things. So try to be a little sensitive to what's going on around you. Try to look at the signs. It may not be easy, though, to understand what's happening, to understand what people are feeling. And so you just need to perhaps make a special effort to perhaps look at body language, try to think a little before you say something. And that extra sensitivity, or at least an extra attempt at sensitivity, might be very useful, and I think that other people would appreciate it. Capricorn, it's kind of a day when you're just sort of wondering what's going on. You Capricorn, you like things done in a particular way. You have ideas about the way things should be done, and when you look at what's going on today, you may just feel that this is just not something you can particularly deal with, or indeed something that you perhaps don't want to deal with. And I think, but the problem is that we've got these two sign changes. We've just had Mars going into Gemini, and then we've got the Sun moving into Leo. And from a Capricorn view, Capricorn and Leo are two signs that really have nothing much in common with each other. Likewise, Capricorn and Gemini are two signs that have nothing much in common with each other. And so with this emphasis on Gemini and Leo, you may feel that you don't really know what's going on, or even if you do know what's going on, you might just not want to deal with it. I mean, that is a possibility. At least that could be your first impulse. But I think you are perhaps being overly cautious there. We've got the Sun and Mars moving into positive signs. So Mars moving into Gemini, Sun moving into Leo. So the sign in between the Sun and Mars is Cancer. And Capricorn is opposition Cancer. So we could argue that the sign Capricorn is on the Sun-Mars midpoint, kind of. So that actually gives you more power than you realize you've got. So you're actually more powerful than you think you are. You may think that you may think you're in an alien environment, on a different planet. That may be how you feel, but you're going to feel that way until you actually do something about it. Now, of course, if you don't do anything about it, then, of course, I suppose you're going to remain with this view that it's an alien planet. But the moment you actually interact with what's going on, things will change very quickly. You will realize that you do have an influence and that people will listen to you. And also, you have this social ability to powerfully create new contacts. So if you meet someone for the first time, for whatever reason, you'll have an impact, and people are going to trust you, and your assertion will be appreciated. And maybe the secret of your power today is the fact that you are different. You know, it's a very positive day with all this stuff in Leo and Gemini, and it can be a bit exhausting. And a lot of people are looking for some kind of stability and reassurance. Now, where are they going to get that stability and reassurance from? Are they going to get it from a Sagittarius or a Gemini like me? Oh, well, I think I'm perhaps flattering myself if I think I can provide any reassurance. But the kind of person that can provide reassurance is someone who is different, who is different from the prevailing energies. And that person would be you. That would be Capricorn. You are like an island of security and stability in a sea of, I don't know, Gemini, Leo, overindulgent, overpositive chaos. So you can be a reassuring influence, and you can use that. So sort of that is perhaps your responsibility. And as soon as you start to reassure other people, and as soon as you start to recognize that people actually want to hear what you've got to say, and people are maybe comforted by you, then you're going to be thinking, hold on, you've got something useful to contribute. And so after that, you will no longer feel that you are in an alien world. You will realize that you are very much part of this world, and actually that you have a very valuable contribution to make. Aquarius. There's a lot going on, isn't there? At least in the air signs. You are an air sign, Aquarius, of course, and the moon is in Aquarius. It doesn't matter where you are on Earth, whatever your time zone, moon is in Aquarius all day long. And Mars has just moved into Gemini. So really, Aquarius, this is in many respects your kind of environment. It's an environment where I think that you thrive, or you can thrive. But the question is, can you thrive on your own? Well, I suppose you could, but you have to remember that the sun is moving into Leo. Leo is your opposite sign. And with the sun moving into Leo, you do need to recognize that some people are getting stronger. Sun works very well in Leo. Leo is the best sign for the sun to be in. because, said, the sun rules Leo. So don't underestimate people's strengths. Now, that means that if you are in any situation of conflict, if you're involved in some sort of rivalry or particularly, then the other person may actually be in a stronger position than you. So take that into account. Now, that might mean if you're in a conflict situation that can wait, but it's not urgent, perhaps you should wait until the sun moves into Virgo, which is sort of in a month's time. Maybe now is not the right time for Aquarians to be involved in a conflict situation, whatever that conflict might be. But it might work in the other way. If Sun is moving into Leo, that means that potentially you're dealing with strong people who you can benefit from. And it's a time today when you yourself are already in a fairly strong position, because you're helped by the fact that Mars is moving into Gemini. Mars is an assertive planet. Gemini is an air sign. The Sun is making a trine to Mars. Yeah, by and large, yeah, you are strongly placed. Unless you're in a conflict. If you're in a conflict, then not so much. But assuming you're not involved in any form of conflict, you are strongly placed. And I think that you can be made even stronger through the actions of another person. And so it goes without saying that if you're in a relationship, particularly a close relationship, don't underestimate the other person. They can be of great benefit to you, but you don't want to clash with them. You might have been sort of lulled into a false sense of security, perhaps, over the last few weeks, feeling, well, they're not in a particularly strong position. There's not much you need to worry about. But no, things are changing with the Sun moving into Leo. So that is something you need to consider. Now, possibly the most important aspect today is a trine between Mars and Pluto. So Mars is in Gemini, which is an air sign. Pluto is in Aquarius, which is, of course, an air sign. So with Mars trine Pluto, this gives you an amazing ability to project yourself and to project what you can do and what makes you special. And in the process, you can create some kind of a transformation. Yeah, you are a transformative person. And you better get used to this, Aquarius. Pluto is going to be in Aquarius for the next, I don't know, what is it? Sometime in the, forget the 20th. What is it? The 2030s. It's going to be there for a long time. And so while Pluto is in Aquarius, you are the person that can create change. I understand Pluto does briefly go out of Aquarius this autumn, but it comes back pretty quick. And so Mars trine Pluto is just a reminder of what you can accomplish and how you can bring to bear your creativity and your fundamental self. And ideally, you'll take other people with you, and you will accept their role. And again, this feeds back on the point I've made that the Sun is moving into Leo. And in fact, the Sun moving into Leo is actually starting to make an opposition to Pluto. Now, that Sun-Pluto opposition is not actually exact until tomorrow, but I think you're already starting to feel it, because that Sun-Pluto opposition is, right across the main axis of your chart, and it does relate to rivalry, and you don't want people to be your rivals. You want them to be your friends, and you need to really understand and respect people's strength, because people are getting stronger and people are not in the mood for compromise, and they're certainly not in the mood for being messed around. So don't mess around with anyone today, and particularly tomorrow. So that is a bit of a warning. And I suppose what I'm really saying is that other people are strong. They can be with you or they can be against you. You do not want them to be against you. You want them to be with you. And so that should be part of your focus over the course of the day, making sure that all of your various relationships are in order and that any conflicts and rivalries have been ironed out as far as is possible. Pisces. Pisces, it's a somewhat difficult time in a way because you're trying to get used to things. And I understand, Pisces, you're quite good at getting used to things. You have this great flexibility. You can move with the tide. But sometimes it's just hard work. And I think that today you're feeling the impact of various sign changes. So Sun moves into Leo today, and over the weekend you've had Mars moving into Gemini. And so what's happening, Pisces, is that you're just getting used to a new reality. And it's a reality where there is a high degree of positivity. And by positivity, I'm talking about the fire signs and the air signs. A lot of stuff in positive signs, the positive signs of the fire, and obviously fire and air. So you've got, with all this emphasis in Leo and Gemini, it just might be too much, because fundamentally Pisces, all things being equal, Pisces is a reflective sign. It's a negative sign. And again, I don't mean negative in a negative sense, if you get my meaning, but it is a negative sign. And it likes to respond. It likes to go with the tide. It likes to have a certain amount of subtlety. And just right now, there's just too much energy, too much positivity, and you might not know how to respond. And it's just important that you understand what is going on and you make the most of your strengths. Now, fortunately, the Sun, just before it leaves Leo, just before it left Leo, made a trine to Neptune. And so there is this Sun trine Neptune in existence over the course of the today and probably into tomorrow as well. And this Sun's trine Neptune allows you to create a bit of distance and also to get a certain sense of perspective, because the Sun trine Neptune is very sensitive. It gives people the possibility of sensitivity in an insensitive environment. And you've got Neptune. Neptune is moving through your sign, moving through the last degree of Pisces, and so you are able at the moment to just pick up on what is going on. You understand why people are doing what they're doing, and I think you also understand the structure of people's ambitions and motivations, and I think that is important. So if you feel that everything is a bit overwhelming, you perhaps need to stop and listen and feel and try to and start to understand what is happening. And then, Pisces, it will make more sense. And at the same time, I think you'll know what you need to do. And the moon it's in a low profile sector of your chart, and it's making a trine to Jupiter. Jupiter is, of course, your ruler, but Jupiter is also in a low profile sector of your chart. So it's a time when you don't have to be in the thick of it. In fact, that's where you should not be. Let the Arieses and the Geminis be in the thick of it, or the Sagittarians perhaps, but you don't have to be there. You can let other people battle it out, and you can withdraw, and you can watch, and you can feel, and I suppose, I don't know, you can be like, maybe you can be like, what's that James Bond film? It's From Russia with Love. You can be like the third Siamese fighting fish. You can, the third Siamese fighting fish who watches the other two fighting fish battle it out and wipe each other out, and then it can move in for the kill. So if you want to be manipulative and negative and sort of destructive about it, if you want to tune into your dark side, you go to YouTube and watch the Siamese fighting fish scene in that Bond film. So you can hang back and watch other people fight it out, and perhaps once they've exhausted themselves, you can move in and just take advantage and just be a manipulative Pisces. It's often forgotten, isn't it, with a Pisces, that they think about the fish, and you think that it's often forgotten that a shark is a fish. So I suppose you can be a shark if you want to be a shark, and perhaps that's what you have to be. You just have to hang back, but not whether you're a shark or a Siamese fighting fish or whatever. That's perhaps the way to do it. So overall, Pisces, it's just very important that you handle things in the right way, and that you don't exhaust yourself, and you use your sensitivity, and you just perhaps watch rather than act. And that's it. Those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And I'm now going to look at today from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Monday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was number 45, which is gathering together. So the principle here is that we need to be with people. We need to gather around something. Now, that might be gathering around a leader. Now, that leader might not be us. It may be that we will benefit from attaching ourselves to someone else because we trust them and they're authoritative, and we think that that is the best way to approach the situation. And in general, it's just important that we recognize that we're not alone, that we can't really do things alone, that we need some kind of support, and perhaps what we're looking for is the right kind of alliance. I suppose this is particularly the case if we're involved in a conflict situation. But even if it's not a conflict situation, we probably can't do everything on our own, and we should be trying to be part of something. And there are two moving lines, and the third line moves and the fourth line moves. And with the third line moving, I think there is a little bit of a problem, because I think that we're going to feel ourselves to be quite isolated. We just feel that, we want to do stuff, we've got our ambitions, we might be having difficulty with something, but we just feel alone, that no one's there to help. And people might be available, but can we trust them? Or are they in fact really interested in us? Maybe they're not showing any interest. And, how do we actually make an impact? Well, if we are feeling isolated, that doesn't mean to say that we should go for the first person that becomes available. Someone offers help, anyone offers help. That's not necessarily the case. We should wait for the right alliance. And I suppose, that could work on different levels. I suppose, I don't know, if you've got a broken washing machine, for example, then you might, unless you know how to fix washing machines, you're gonna need some help. I suppose you're gonna have to pay someone to fix it, but you have to pay for the right person to fix it. And so perhaps you might feel isolated because the washing machine's broken, but yeah, you need to find the right person to fix it, and maybe to begin with, the right person is not available. You can't go for anyone. So perhaps we need to maybe wait and not be too afraid of being isolated. It may just be a temporary situation. And then the fourth line moves, and that does suggest that after a while things do happen, that we can actually attach ourselves to a group. We can perhaps find someone that we trust and respect, who is able to provide effective leadership. With this hexagram, it seems to be more about us following a leader rather than us being the leader. I mean, it's always nice to be leaders. We're all supposed to be leaders, but in this case, it seems to be about us finding the right leadership. Who is going to be the person who we can trust? And it does seem that at a certain stage we can find that person. But just because we find that person doesn't mean that everything is resolved straight away, because some things do take time to work themselves through. Because the hexagram following this, which, when you've got these two broken lines, when you switch them, you move to hexagram number 39, which is obstruction. And so with obstruction, it's a situation where we can't go forward. If we were to go forward, we'd get ourselves into trouble. And perhaps we need to retreat, or at the very least stay where we are. So it seems to me that we're in a part of a process where not everything is going right, and we certainly need to find the right people to follow, or the right people to trust for whatever reason. But even when we find them, we might not get the satisfaction we're looking for. We might still find that we can't really move forward. So I get the impression today that it's kind of work in progress. We're involved in something, but I don't think we're going to find a resolution today. But it's nothing disastrous. Remember, this is a hexagram where it is just for today, and tomorrow is a completely different situation. So let's now look at Mars in Gemini. I know Mars has already gone into Gemini. I think it went over the weekend, but it's a Monday. Mars has just gone into Gemini, and I looked at the news. I didn't see anything massive going on, so I thought, yeah, let's talk about Mars in Gemini. So Mars in Gemini Mars represents how we assert ourselves. That's the standard way, where we use our energy. It's a male planet. Now that means that in a female chart that Mars is projectable. So a woman with her Mars in Gemini, she could project that Mars onto someone else. We saw, for example, I don't know, with Victoria Beckham, Mars can be a sportsman. Mars is a general characteristic of a sportsman. So what kind of man is she looking for? She's looking for Mars in Gemini. She's looking for so that's, it's not just the fact, Mars in Gemini in itself is not a sportsman. In David Beckham's case, it's the fact that in Victoria Beckham's case, she had Sun in Mars in Gemini, sextile Sun in Aries, so Sun sextile Mars together. was someone who was sporting. But Mars in Gemini is projectable. So there is a question of ownership there. But, all things being equal, Mars in Gemini is perhaps someone who puts a lot of energy into talking, communicating, and there's a certain lack of intensity to Mars in Gemini. And it's not like Mars in Taurus. Mars in Taurus is a fixed sign. You just focus on one thing. I've got Mars in Taurus. That might explain how I just do these videos day. And you're maybe if you appreciate these videos, maybe you're lucky that I've got Mars in Taurus. If you like these videos, Mars in Taurus just goes on and on. If I had Mars in Gemini, perhaps I would have given up by now, wouldn't I? I don't know. That's a problem with Mars in Gemini, isn't it? That Mars in Gemini can be a little bit inconsistent, puts a lot of energy into something, but then Mars in Gemini is it's two-bodied. So it has two things it can get interested in, and then it can start to see a conflict between one and the other. And that is another aspect of the sign Gemini. Gemini sees differences, and I don't know. I remember a long time ago, or just after when I started studying astrology, someone suggested to me, this was just when South Africa was still under the apartheid regime. Someone suggested that South Africa was ruled by Gemini because of a link with apartheid. Apartheid looks at differences. Apartheid, what does that mean? Separate development. That's a sort of very negative side of Gemini, looking at how people are different. And that can be an aspect of Mars in Gemini, putting energy into seeing differences, perhaps trying to exaggerate differences. So that could be how it works. And yes, Mars in Gemini can scatter its energy. It can put a certain amount of energy into something, then it gets bored. Gemini gets bored. And then it just moves on to something else. Oh, let's move on to this. So that can be a negative aspect to Mars in Gemini. I suspect that's going to the negative aspect of Mars in Gemini, maybe more in the case of a male chart than a female chart, because in a male chart, Mars in Gemini is not projected. Maybe in a female chart, Mars in Gemini might be projected onto another person. Onto a man or a male family member. That's possible. I suppose in terms of relationships, I suppose you could say that a woman born by night will project her Mars, will be looking for Mars in her partner, and if she's born by day, it might be the sun. That might be one way of looking at it. But Mars in Gemini, of course, likes to talk, all things being equal. And it's about putting a lot of energy perhaps into the brain. That's where it goes. It's not necessarily into action. A lot of talk, not so much action. So those are a few thoughts about Mars in Gemini. And I now wanted to just look at a few Mars in Gemini charts to see if we get any insights about how this might be working. So let's start with the maybe we'll start with the Trump family. So let's see. Here is Barron Trump. Barron Trump has Mars in Gemini. Now, I don't know anything about Barron Trump. He's only just turned 18. I don't think anyone really knows about him outside the Trump family. So one doesn't want to speculate too much here. But he has Mars square Mercury. I don't know what he's interested in. I suppose if you say he's interested in computers, well, everyone's interested in computers of a certain age, so that doesn't really tell us much. But perhaps what's important about the fact that he has Mars in Gemini is the fact that his mother, Melania Trump, She also has Mars in Gemini. So again, I don't have a time of birth for Melania. So when we look at Melania's Mars in Gemini, rather than think about who she is and her personality, we could perhaps see this in terms of projection. Melania's Mars in Gemini represents the men in her life. So the two men in her life, the most important men in her life, are her husband and her son. So her son, Barron Trump, has Mars in Gemini. So that fits for projection very well. And of course, as we know, her husband has Sun in Gemini. Now, if we say, by the way, this is interesting point about Melania. If we take the view that by night it is Mars who represents the partner in a woman's chart, and if it's by date in the daytime it's the Sun, I would have said, looking at her chart, that Donald Trump is shown by Mars in Gemini rather than Sun in Taurus. Now that might indicate that Melania Trump was born by night rather than by day. So there is a possibility there. So on the theme of politics, Boris Johnson has Mars in Gemini. In fact, Boris Johnson has his Mars return at the moment. There's a lot happening in Boris Johnson's chart at the moment. He's just had Pluto opposition his Mars. He's got a Mars return, and he's probably experiencing quite a lot. I don't think he's particularly happy at the moment. I think it seems to be something annoying him. Maybe he's annoyed at the way things are happening in Ukraine. I know he's already talked to Donald Trump. I think he's already talked to Donald Trump about it, wanting to reassure him so that Donald Trump is going to keep maintain support for Ukraine if and probably when he gets elected president. And Boris is not very consistent. He is a strong Gemini. I mean, he's got Mars, Mercury, Sun, and Venus in Gemini. So it's kind of difficult to talk about Boris Johnson's Mars in Gemini and know that one is talking about the Mars. One might be talking about his Mercury or his Sun or his Venus, but he does seem to scatter his energy. Of course, he is someone who is, whatever you think about him, he's really intelligent. You know, as a child, he was precociously intelligent. He was apparently really good at playing Scrabble, and that would be, Mars in Gemini, putting his energy into words. He is a wordsmith. He is a journalist, and he talks and talks and talks. And at the same time, I'm wondering about a certain insensitivity here with Mars in Gemini. I mean, I know that he's got planets in water, but he's got Moon in Scorpio. Mars in Gemini can just be putting his energy into something without really thinking about it. You think about him and Western powers sabotaging the peace talks that were taking place in Istanbul in spring of 2022 between Russia and Ukraine, which came very close to succeeding. And Boris was one of the people who, went to Kiev, and after he went to Kiev, the whole thing collapsed. So he didn't want peace in that part of the world, and he's an advocate for this war to continue. And so that's perhaps Mars in Gemini, putting a lot of words into it, words, accusations, but at the same time not perhaps thinking about the human cost. That's always a Gemini issue. May not be the Mars in Gemini, but Gemini can intellectualize things and not actually think about the people who are actually dying on the battlefield. Gemini can talk and can be into expressing itself, and the words are very important. And sometimes the words can lead to drastic results, and so I mean tragic results. So one person who had Mars in Gemini was Sophie Scholl. So she was executed by the Nazis for by the Germans, by her fellow Germans, for putting out leaflets condemning the war, condemning the Second World War, and Mars in Gemini. So that would be that could be one aspect of Mars in Gemini. Mars in Gemini has to communicate. That's very important for Mars. That's where she puts her energy. And in this case, she was in her early 20s. So, I mean, maybe she wasn't projecting. Maybe this really maybe this really was her. And she was actually owning her Mars, and in the process of owning her Mars, she was, I suppose she was martyring herself, but she felt she had to communicate. She didn't like something, she didn't like the way things were going, so Mars just had to communicate. And in this case, you might see Sun in Taurus and Mars in Gemini kind of working together. Sun in Taurus being very focused on something, to the exclusion of all else, putting energy into something which in the end was going to lead to her own death, and being completely stubborn about it. And notice also she has Jupiter opposition Uranus. Jupiter opposition Uranus is a desire for freedom, not wanting to be constrained. And you could say that Mars, it's pretty wide, but that Mars is sort of, make it on a T over T square between Jupiter and Uranus. And perhaps you can see the Moon-Mars conjunction the Moon-Mars conjunction, the midpoint of the Moon-Mars conjunction is sort of close to the midpoint of the Jupiter-Uranus. So, that's perhaps how Mars is working in her case, having to communicate, having to spread her word, even having to put up leaflets. And when she was on trial, I don't know, I get the impression that the Nazis would not have really wanted to execute someone like her. But she couldn't help herself. She gave the court a piece of her mind, and that probably made it absolutely clear, that sealed her fate. But that's Mars in Gemini. Mars in Gemini wasn't going to shut up, and linked with with Sun in Taurus. So I would have said Sophie Scholl is a good example of how Mars in Gemini works. But it is also a reminder you have to look at the rest of the chart. So Mars in Gemini on its own, perhaps in a situation where it was facing execution, Mars in Gemini might have decided to just change its mind, apologize, maybe put the blame on someone else. That would be Mars in Gemini. But you have to look at the overall chart, and in her case, you see she's got that Sun in Taurus. And Sun in Taurus is really stubborn and focused, and is prepared to see through something to the point of death. So you can't just look at Mars in Gemini on its own. Yes, Mars in Gemini could be unreliable, unstable, and could look after its own survival, trying to talk its way out of trouble, but maybe not so much with Sun in Taurus. Tony Blair had Mars in Gemini. Now, so Tony Blair, he's back in fashion, isn't he? Or back in the headlines now, because now there's a Labour government in Britain. But I think with Tony Blair, he's got a foundation. It's a huge foundation, and I forget what its precise name is. But he is trying to influence policy him and his organisation are trying to influence policy in Britain. And he has Mars in Gemini. He has Mars in Gemini rising. And he was a very effective politician. What's really interesting about Tony Blair is that Tony Blair is an example of someone who was able to be charismatic and be in tune with the people under him, with voters, and yet he had no water in his chart, unless you count Uranus in Cancer. And that's quite unusual to have that supposed sensitivity. But I think maybe it's not about sensitivity, it's about just being the person of the moment. I suppose when you're the person of the moment, nothing you do will go wrong because you are current. And Mars in Gemini as well perhaps helps. Mars in Gemini rising, it's someone who can communicate to the British people. Now, another example, by the way, of someone who was a very charismatic politician who had pretty much no water in his chart was, of course, Adolf Hitler. Of course, Adolf Hitler was a Taurus as well, like Tony Blair. Though I don't think, regardless of what happened in Iraq, I don't think you can put Tony Blair on the level of Adolf Hitler. But perhaps he has certain things in common. But Mars in Gemini, he seemed to be able to use his Mars in Gemini quite effectively. And I suppose helped by the fact that he has Moon sort of trine Mars. So that's his Mars rising. Mars rising, of course, he did, in the end, his reputation got destroyed because of him getting involved in the Iraq War. This whole fake thing about weapons of mass destruction. So Mars rising in Gemini, he got Britain involved in a fair amount of wars. He got us involved in Iraq because he had the bombing of Serbia. But Mars in Gemini can always rationalize that. And of course, Boris has got Mars in Gemini as well. He was able to rationalize what he's doing, and, for example, his responsibility for what's going on in Ukraine. So anyone else? Ursula von der Leyen. I don't have a time of birth for Ursula von der Leyen, but she has Mars in Gemini, and she's got. Mars is about to transit her Mars. So a lot of people, we've got Boris is about to have a Mars return. Ursula von der Leyen is about to have a Mars return. Tony Blair is about to have a Mars return. I wonder what it's all about. Is something about to happen in the world? I don't know. Something is starting to really annoy Ursula von der Leyen. She's got Mars Pluto. Look at her Mars Pluto square. Now, Mars in Gemini, I don't know. I mean, that might be projected. She doesn't strike me as particularly Mars in Gemini, but it is a female chart, so that Mars might be projected. I suppose in terms of her energy, she's done lots of different things. I think she's actually, am I right in saying that she's actually trained as a doctor, but then she's gone into politics, and now she is president of the European Commission. So I suppose you could say Mars in Gemini, she's always being able to perhaps recreate herself. And Mars square Pluto, a lot of ambition there. Perhaps Pluto, that square to Pluto gives Mars some focus it wouldn't have otherwise. I mean, given she gives me the impression of someone who is totally not able to do this job. She does not strike me as being very effective, but Mars square Pluto, perhaps she's able to get away with it somehow through just sheer willpower. That's what she wants. But it'd be interesting to see what happens, what's going on with Ursula von der Leyen with this Mars return, Mars hitting her square. Is it something going on in Ukraine, but we'll never know about? I don't know. That is a possibility. Now, when we looked at Sophie Scholl, we saw someone basically being killed by the desire to communicate. If she had just shut up and not put up these posters on the campus around Munich University criticizing a war. Perhaps if she'd been I don't know whether contrite is the right word, but if she'd said the right thing at her trial, maybe she would have avoided execution. I don't know. I don't think that looks good for the regime to execute someone like her, but maybe she could have saved herself. But still, Mars in Gemini has its dangers if you are trying to go against the regime, if you're trying to say things against powerful people. And we see the same with Jamal Khashoggi. So Jamal Khashoggi was a Saudi-born journalist who constantly criticized the Saudi regime, and in particular MSB, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. And so what happened to him was he was in Turkey, and for some reason he had to go into the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, and he went in there and he was just murdered. And he just, again, couldn't help himself, could he? And there is his Mars in Gemini. Mars in Gemini, you could say, is the communicator. And like Ursula von der Leyen, hold on, Mars square Pluto, that's Jamal Khashoggi. Are we seeing, let me just quickly look at Ursula von der Leyen's. So Ursula von der Leyen was born on October the 8th, 1958, and Jamal Khashoggi was born on October the 13th, 1958. So he was born 5 days after Ursula von der Leyen. I can't see Ursula von der Leyen taking big risks, so it just shows 5 days can make a big difference. She does, she follows the party line, does what she has to do. She doesn't rock the boat. But with Jamal Khashoggi, he certainly did with his Mars in Gemini and Mars square Pluto. His Mars Pluto square Pluto was working in a very different way to to Ursula von der Leyen. So Ursula von der Leyen, Mars Pluto was about her power, was focused about herself and surviving the political games in Germany and the European Union. But with Jamal Khashoggi, Mars in Gemini, there was something annoyed him. He got obsessed about the Saudi regime and how awful it was, and criticizing it and criticizing the crown prince. He kept going, couldn't stop, and in the end he went to the consulate in Istanbul and got murdered. So again, Mars in Gemini can be a bit of a problem, perhaps, if you are a journalist. But you can see how if you have Mars in Gemini, that might work very well to be a journalist. Remember, Boris Johnson was a journalist before he got into politics. So that may be a way in which Mars in Gemini works. Now, I'm running out of time, but I suppose we should focus on someone who is in the news. And just a reminder that Jill Biden has Mars in Gemini. So Jill Biden, she's been sort of accused of all sorts of things, isn't she? I think she's been accused of elder abuse, that she wants to stay in the White House, and she's encouraging so far her husband to stay, to seek a second term. Maybe I think Jill Biden quite likes being First Lady, but she has Mars in Gemini, and I suppose that Mars in Gemini, she perhaps doesn't always know where to. I don't really know much about Jill Biden. Now, that Mars in Gemini could be projected, but perhaps it's also a little bit insensitive. There are things she wants, Mars in Gemini. She likes all the stuff going on in the White House. She likes being First Lady, and she's not really thinking about the broader picture. That could be how Mars in Gemini actually works, and that Sun-Mars conjunction she has, okay, that might say something about her husband, but it may also say something about her we don't know. there was this idea, but what a nice person but Jill Biden was. She's the faithful wife, all this kind of stuff, a first lady. But it's only recently that she's been under the microscope and she's had serious criticism. And it may be that Mars in Gemini, maybe she's a real nightmare to have around. Maybe she talks a lot. Of course, she did her doctorate, didn't she? She did that doctorate. I did actually download that doctorate and I tried to read it. Dr. Jill. So that could be Mars in Gemini. Mars in Gemini. She wants to put her energy into something supposedly intellectual. Dr. Jill. The doctorate is not. It's not my understanding of a doctorate. You can get hold of it. I don't see how she could possibly claim that is worth calling herself a doctor for. It's more of a policy statement, if I remember rightly. There's no real original. I couldn't see much in the way of original thinking and real serious research there. But still, it made Jill Biden happy, and maybe it made Mars in Gemini happy, being able to call herself Dr. Jill through this academic endeavor. So that's her. So I now want to consider a few countries with Mars in Gemini. Oh, one event, by the way. The Civil War. Well, the United States and the Civil War both had Mars in Gemini. The US has Mars in Gemini. So the US having Mars in Gemini, you could say, well, it has a surplus of energy. It puts a lot of energy into words. That's possible. And it puts a lot of energy perhaps into creating differences. I think in a way America is perhaps obsessed with differences. And perhaps it always has been. You could say that with America's obsession with diversity and race, and it's about how people are different. We have different communities, and diversity might sound like a nice thing, but that's maybe Mars in Gemini working. So it sort of transitions from, when it first becomes a state that, you have slaves and you have free men and you have different slave citizens. And in the original constitution, saying that something like a slave is worth a certain percentage of a white citizen. There was a percentage thing in the Constitution. That's a very Mars in Gemini thing to do. And then it sort of transitions into looking at the differences between people and the differences between countries. We've got our friends, we've got our enemies, and perhaps that would be how Mars in Gemini might work. And it's perhaps not surprising then, remembering Uranus, there's a sort of Mars-Uranus conjunction in the United States' chart. It's perhaps not surprising that at the time of the Civil War, that Mars was in Gemini, and there was a Mars-Uranus conjunction in Gemini. So Mars in Gemini, we see the differences between the South, North, and the South, Union and Confederate, and that's perhaps what a civil war is all about. In fact, Mars in Gemini is about a civil war. Here's Mars, war, Gemini, two sides of the coin, two things fighting each other. So that I think kind of works quite well. Now, turning to France, France has Mars in Gemini, whichever way you look at it, actually. So here is the chart for the Fifth Republic. This is the one that I think Nick Campion put in his book of world horoscopes. He has Mars in Gemini there. Mars would also be on Gemini on the 4th of October, which is, I think, when the French Parliament voted for the Fifth Republic Constitution. And if you look for the fall of the Bastille, when the Bastille was surrendered, Mars is likewise in Gemini. So there's a real Gemini thing going on with France. And perhaps with this Gemini, again, I don't know a great deal about France, but with France, I suppose it likes its different sort of constitutions. I suppose you also have, it's had its 5 constitutions. I suppose Mars in Gemini is quite sort of an intellectual sign, and of course France is known for its intellectuals and its public intellectuals. Of course, things people like Foucault and Jean-Paul Sartre. Jean-Paul Sartre was, of course, a Gemini. So it perhaps values the intellect in a way that other countries don't do, and its philosophers. And I mean, maybe that is a good thing about France. So that may be how Mars in Gemini is working. And we do get confirmation that this Mars in Gemini is working when we look at an event that's happened in recent event that happened in France's history, which was the fire at Notre Dame. So fire at Notre Dame, Mars was at 10 Gemini. So France had this fire, this catastrophic fire with its most important building, the most important historical building in France was gutted. Well, I think it was almost gutted, and so Mars was it had its Mars return at the time of that. So I think that kind of confirms that Mars in Gemini is very important now for France. Now this raises the issue about what is happening in France right now, because Mars has gone into Gemini, and I think it's very likely that Mars moving into Gemini is going to have an impact on the country. And, we've got the Olympics coming up. The Paris Olympics is, when is the Paris Olympics? Paris Olympics, I think it starts on July the 26th. So at the end of a week, I'll be talking more about the Paris Olympics, but we can see that the Paris Olympics will have Mars at 4 Gemini. So what's this Paris Olympics going to be like? I think if I was the French authorities, I would be really worried about the Olympics. I think I'm already worried about it. But with Mars in Gemini and the way it links up with the French charts, whether it's the Fifth Republic or whether it's the fall of the Bastille, Mars is coming up. We've got the Mars return, like we had with the burning of Notre Dame. So yeah, I think there's more stuff going on in terms of France, and I'm going to, in a few days' time, I'm going to do another video on France, because I think that's perhaps where the action is. Anyway, that is all I'm going to say for today. Sorry, my descriptions of Mars and Gemini were a bit chaotic, but still, I hope you found them of some interest. And if you did find this video of interest, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I would of course be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thank you very much for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.